So, first of all, thank you for coming along to the last conference, and thank you for coming along to my presentation. For the next 30 minutes, we're going to have a bit of a look at what it means to be a leader. Now, who here was in Stephanie's talk just 5 minutes ago? Okay, some of you. So, there's actually a bit of an alignment between some of the things that I'll be saying and some of the things that she says, but there are going to be some substantial differences as well. So, what I want you to think about is, what does it mean to be a leader? In your organization, in your life, what defines leadership? Passion. Good answer. Someone was listening this morning. Passion is a very good answer. What else? Vision. Good answer.
People want to follow.
People want to follow. Yeah. Not that they're here because you're telling them to follow you, but they actually want to follow you. Now, here's a little secret about managers. Managers have institutional authority. They have authority because it is imbued in them by the organization. That is not the same as someone who is able to convince and talk and negotiate with people and convince them to come along on the journey. Difference between a personal authority and an institutional authority. Standing in front of you today, I have a level of institutional authority. I've been chosen and selected by Craig and Ed to come and give this presentation, so I have a level of authority over what we're talking about. But at the same time, you, all of you, had the choice to come into this presentation and listen to me ramble on for half an hour. So in that, there's this level of my personal authority of this person sounds interesting. We have the law of 2 feet here in this conference. If you don't like what I'm saying, you can walk out. Now, it is a sign of my leadership, as in this context, as a presenter, or a sign of your interest and our alignment that you will, or may not, stay as the case may be. So, let's look at a couple of interesting cases. What is similar about all of those companies up on the screen? They're out of business, or they've been bought, or they've been acquired, or they've been merged, or split, or all sorts of different reasons. Why is leadership important? And let me show you, just quick, oops, all right, what's going on here? This is the Fortune 50 companies from 1985 through to 2013. You can see that already we have 10 or so companies who have dropped down to zero. They've been bought out or acquired, forcibly merged, split apart by federal regulation. Since 1985, of the top 50 companies in America, right, 27 of them no longer exist in the form that they were in 1985, and many of them don't exist at all. All right? This is why leadership is important. All right? I like to describe it as the Kodak moment. We all remember the Kodak moment from the 80s, that beautiful scene that you take that photograph of. Well, Kodak moment means something entirely different now. And we want to avoid our Kodak moment. So let's just get rid of that. So myself, I've been working with businesses to apply Agile business management, taking Agile outside IT for the last 7, 8 years. It's been a fascinating journey. I've worked with some of the large organizations around Southeast Asia. We've done full organizational transformation, Agile HR, Agile IT, this is Agile, of course Agile IT, Agile Finance. These are, when you walk out of this room, I want you to understand that it's not only about working software. It's about the principles and the values of agility and how they apply to business. So let's start there. Okay. Hands up who doesn't know what this is. Good. This is the Agile Manifesto. Right? These are the reasons, the 4 key values of why we're in business. Right? This is why we're building a product. Now, not all of them relate outside of IT, but we can stretch it slightly. Let's talk then. Individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Right? Everyone knows what I mean when I say that? Let's look at someone who's not in the Agile space, who 30 years ago, 40 years ago, said, drive out fear so that everyone may work effectively for the company. Right? Now this is, if you don't know, Deming was a luminary in the quality space in Japan, and the origin of many of the lean manufacturing concepts, wrote a number of books, Out of the Crisis and the New Economics. Well worth a read. They may be 30 years old, but they're relevant today. So what does it mean to be an Agile leader? Well, the first one we need to look at is it's not about managing. It's about facilitating. It's about working with your teams and convincing them, working with them, that we are working together for a common outcome, and this is what we need to do to get there. That's not to say that facilitation sometimes involves compromise. As a manager, you need to be able to compromise. But sometimes there are things where you can't compromise, where you will stand back and go, no, this is the only way it can happen. But the point of facilitation is to understand those aspects, those times when you can't compromise, when it is my way or the highway, if I can use a metaphor, and work with your teams, work with your individuals to actually make them understand and learn how or why that's important and how we can work together to reach those common goals. Right? Here's the critical thing to understand. You, as leaders, as managers, are not responsible for the delivery of the day-to-day work. Right? Your teams are writing software. They own the responsibility for delivering that software. You own the responsibility for facilitating them and getting all of them pointing in the same direction so they can deliver the best damn software they possibly can. And it doesn't matter what software, it could be finance. To do this, teams need to feel safe. Teams need to feel safe to fail. They need to feel empowered. All of these wonderful things that we hear about in an Agile setting all the time. But it's not just your teams, it's the teams around you. How many of you have seen, either firsthand or secondarily, where you're working very tightly to a time frame and something's going wrong and there's a convenient DBA over there who you can blame for the delay? All right? Maybe, or a sysadmin or someone in another team. It's like, oh, look, as long as the delay in this project is caused by someone else, it's okay. Right? I've seen that way too many times in organizations. Safe to fail is not about we're safe to fail because my team has someone to blame. That's not safe to fail. Safe to fail is taking ownership and accountability of that and working across teams with your peers in other divisions, other departments to go, all right, there's a problem. It's not about assigning blame. We have delays, we have issues. Hell, the entire project may be about to be cancelled because it's fundamentally flawed. That's okay. But that idea of safe to fail is critical. Motivation in an Agile team then becomes difficult. How do you motivate? There's been a lot of studies that show that financial motivations don't have the value of actually getting a higher performing or a higher productivity than you would think. I worked with one organization over in Singapore. They were a financial services house. They provided, people would come to them and say, I've got $1 million invested for me. Okay, that's what they would do, and they would create accounts. It's Singapore, there's lots of financial services houses. It tends to be what Singapore does. Now, in there, they had salespeople. The salespeople did what salespeople did, and they went out and they would drum up new leads and new business, and they would then take a 5% commission of whatever was sold to those clients. Right. We got rid of commissions. Right. Now, any of you who have worked in an organization which is sales heavy knows that commissions are what drives salespeople. we actually saw a 15 to 17% increase in sales, conversion of leads to leads to customers over the 2 years in which we implemented this after we removed commissions. Now, why? Yes, it's a chaotic system. There are so many reasons, so let's sort of drill down. And there's a couple of reasons why that could be. One of the main reasons that we looked at was we made those salespeople part of the team. They understood how the accountants and the traders operated. They worked with them to work out what were the best product streams. And they got paid a reasonable baseline salary, and if they didn't do their job, they get fired, just like anybody else. You expect them to do their job. But by getting rid of the commissions, by putting them in the teams and making them part of the teams, we had a very successful conversion rate of leads to customers. And if you're in business, that's why you're in business. You might be a software developer, but you have to understand you're in business, and there's a reason for it. So let's just look at the motivations then. Now, this is much maligned, and it may not necessarily be everyone's cup of tea, but Maslow's hierarchy of needs is generally considered to be a good model of motivation. Baseline minimum wage employment is at the bottom. If you go to work to get a paycheck so you can go home, so that you can spend time with your family, great stuff. I've got a 2-year-old. I like spending time with my family, don't get me wrong. But if the only reason you go to work is for that baseline safety and security, then you're not empowered or engaged. We want, and as leaders in an agile business, we want to motivate our employees at that highest level of self-actualization. We want to get to that point where an agile team, an agile individual owns. This is, for those of you who heard my 5-minute talk this morning, passion. I want people who come to work because they have passion. And as a leader, you need to kindle that passion. Passion doesn't necessarily... You won't always hire passion. You won't always get someone come in the door who's got the right passion and the right skills and go, done, you're hired. That's a rare employee. But sometimes you have to go, what is your passion? Bernd and Vicky Schiffer's talk this morning about feedback, peer feedback, if you remember that. That was very interesting because one of the great things about passion, one of the great things about leadership is that you have the opportunity to ask, what drives you? What is your passion? What do you love about this? And you can actually frame your feedback to them in that context. You can say, oh, look, I'm really passionate about doing this sort of thing. Mobile development or what, it doesn't actually matter. It's like, well, okay, if you want to do that, if you want to be there, then these are the areas you're going to need to improve. You can actually provide your feedback to your customers, to your employees or staff or team members or colleagues or superiors. You can give feedback up as well and say, if you want to drive and meet that passion, then this is how you're going to need to move and work. So let's move on to one of the other manifesto items. Okay. Now, what have I changed? Working software. Why have I changed it? Because it's not just software. Spot on. Doesn't actually matter what it is that you're being agile about. All right? Now, I call it completed customer requirements. You could call it working stuff. It actually makes no difference. It's outcomes. You're providing an outcome for your customer. Now, documentation is still important. Documentation gives us a framework. Now, once again, we have a quote from Deming. I like Deming. You just have to live with that. Documentation is a critical part in most organizations. It provides traceability, it provides a framework, and the information that everyone needs to do something in a standard way. But it's about just-in-time documentation. It's about getting the right information to the right people at the right time. So this is a fairly simple model of how an agile team works. Right? You can't add more work. If you expect them to write documentation, if you expect them to add an additional 100 hours of work into a project, then something's going to either fall out the end, you're going to have to increase the size of the team, or increase the length of the project. Okay? It's a fixed capacity pipe. There are ways you can improve the throughput of your teams, absolutely. But The way you improve the throughput of your teams is a slow, methodical, continuous improvement, Kaizen, of how those teams operate. You do not and cannot expect that your teams, just because you have more work, are going to work harder. Overtime is a disaster. Anyone here has anything to do with the computer games industry? No? All right. So in the computer games industry, there's a concept which you may have heard of called crunch time. Crunch time is when you're getting close to release of a product, all the marketing material has been put together, there's a date, it's going to be released by this date, and all the developers and artists and everyone who's on this project works really, really, really hard to meet that deadline. Have a guess for a standard game how long crunch time goes for. Months? How many? 3? 4? Try 6 to 9. 6 to 9 months of a 2-year project, or a 2.5-year project, is spent working 10 to 12-hour days, 6 days a week. Now, for many of these people, it's a passion. It's a labor of love. They love what they do, so they're willing to put it in. It's why the pay in the computer game industry is particularly bad. But it's unsustainable. Every piece of evidence shows that sustained overtime for more than about 3 weeks, you end up actually producing less than if you hadn't worked overtime at all. All right? So always have to remember that. There is a cadence, a capacity to your teams, and as a leader, you need to be able to follow and track that. Leadership, on the other hand, now I'm talking Deming now, some of you may recognize this, okay? Special causes and common causes for those of you who are following at home. As a leader, when I talk about facilitation, I mean you let your teams get on with the job. You need to step in as a leader when something is going awry, when something is going unusually bad. You need to trust your team that when things are in a standard deviation, okay, you have a velocity. Your velocity averages between 7 and 8 or 7 and 12 story points per iteration. All right? If you get to 12 story points, if you're at 12 story points or 7 story points, then you're still within an expected variation. Let your team get on with the job. Don't interfere. Facilitate. Watch. Don't be an absentee manager. Don't completely ignore them, but don't interfere. Trust the team to manage that. But then we have the worst kind, is an absentee manager who then, when those go outside of control, and the team may not necessarily have the skills or the understanding to know exactly when that is, that's when you need to jump in and go, okay, we're going to need to bring in more developers, we're going to need to engage with the DBAs, we're going to need to get additional funding for the customer, we're going to need to rescope, whatever it is, it doesn't actually matter. But you got those engagements, and that's how it works. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. I like contracts. I will say it. All right? I'm a manager. Of course I have to like contracts because it's how businesses work. I do, however, want my contracts to be adaptable. A contract is not there as a shield. It is not there to say, this is what you're going to do, and I'm going to hold you to it. And if you don't do it, or if you're outside of scope within a certain tolerance, I'll take you to court and get my money back. That's a bad contract. That's a contract where I don't trust you. And I want to trust you. You're my customers. Or I'm your customer. It doesn't matter which way it goes. We want to have that relationship, that trust. So if we look at this, trust goes at different levels. All right? Reference-based trust. It's like, I trust you, sir, because LS says you're a good guy. Great. Okay? I have no relationship with you. My trust with you is based entirely on a reference, a recommendation. That's how most relationships start. It could be a YouTube recommendation, a Google recommendation. It could be you're looking at Uber and you go, this taxi driver has 3, 4 stars. Great, I'll go with them. All right? There's a recommendation, a reference. We then go on to contract-based trust. I trust you to do what I ask you to do because I've got a contract with you that says that if you don't, there are penalties that apply. Most businesses stop at that point. Most businesses get the engagement with their customer or vendor. They put the contract in place, and that's the limit of that relationship. But we're an Agile team. We're an agile company. We want to be able to change and adapt as circumstances evolve. We don't want that Kodak moment. We want to actually go, that's it. Suddenly, mobile apps are taking off. Granted, that was 10 years ago. But we need to start to build a mobile app. It's not in the contract, but we have a relationship. And that's where we start to go up the level. Knowledge-based trust, identification trust, and team trust. Team trust could be renamed as partner trust. I trust you because we are strategic partners. You and I, we work together day in, day out. Okay? Your teams and my teams are interlinked. I probably have your staff members on my teams. And if something changes, it's not a new contract. It's not 6 months of lawyers checking the contract to see if it's possible. It's a conversation. It's, hey, we're going to need 3 more guys to write an iPhone app so that we can address this. Do you have the capacity now? It's like, yes, we do. It's going to cost this much. This is how it's going to work. Da, da, da. Yep, great. We have a partnership. We are aligned. Vendor and customer. Now, also, when I say customer, I'm also not talking about external customers. I'm also talking internal customers. Doesn't matter whether it's you're a company, Ambulance Victoria, and you're creating a relationship with a vendor like Oracle. Okay? It doesn't matter whether you're the finance division and you have a relationship with the IT division. There's a customer-vendor relationship that's occurring there. And we always need to make sure that that's going. Kanban is a great tool. New Zealand, anyone here from New Zealand? A couple of you? New Zealand Post Group. It's a postal service. It's a bank. It does many, many different things. Their executives, senior high-level executives, the group CEOs, the CFO, have a Kanban board. In fact, they have a Kanban room. They call it the sorting room because it's a post office, and they have to have those post metaphors in. So they've got all across the room Kanban boards that show the strategy. Anyone in the organization can walk in and go, that's what we're doing. Great. Doesn't matter whether I'm a postman, doesn't matter whether I'm a middle manager or a senior executive. I can walk into that room and see. Now, it all starts to come together when that communication, that collaboration, that leadership that is shown at the middle management level, all the way up to the senior executives, and the way they go. The last image I want to show you, also from New Zealand Post Group, when we're talking leadership, when we're talking communication and collaboration, in large part, we need to talk about the elephant in the room. We need to talk about those uncomfortable issues, people who aren't performing, people who are absentee, projects which are failing, projects which are fundamentally unsound in their idea, and it doesn't matter whether it's the CEO's pet project. These are the ideas that need to be talked about. And leadership in an agile context means safe to fail. And it doesn't matter whether it's a CEO, middle manager, or a developer, everyone needs to be safe to fail. Now, New Zealand Post Group literally has a picture of an elephant on a wall. Great idea, I love it. And anyone can put a post-it note on there, and that post-it note will be discussed. The whole point of the elephant is we'll discuss whatever's on that board. Now, sorry. Oh, sorry, it's changed slides. I just want to touch on a couple of topics on communication. Right, so, we have to understand a critical aspect of communication, and that is, anyone know what this is showing? Anyone here does mathematics? If I say order n squared, do you know what I mean? Some of you? In mathematics, there are types of functions. And order 1, this is an order 1 function, communication. Doesn't matter how many of you are in the room. Could be 1 of you, could be 1,000 of you. Okay? It will take the same amount of time to send the same message. Okay? An order n conversation, okay, will increase linearly with the number of people in the conversation. Okay? Good example of that is a conversation. Okay? We're going to talk. All right? 2 of us will talk. 3 of us, we're going to send a message. Your daily stand-up is an order n. Everyone's just saying the same thing. You add 10 more people to a daily stand-up, and it'll take twice as long. You add another 10, it'll take the same amount of time again. Everyone's got a minute to talk. Right? That's why team sizes in Agile are 7 plus or minus 2. It's not because 7 plus or minus 2 is some number someone dreamed up. It's because any larger than that, and communication becomes an overhead rather than an actual mechanism for improvement. Right? That's why 7 minus 2 is so magical. Right? If this was not a presentation, if we were having a formal conversation with and you were all asking me questions, then the more people in the room asking questions, the longer it will take. So, on that note, any questions? No? Yep.
Are the salespeople happy to be on the baseline salary?
Yes, because we increased their baseline salary, so it was a reason. So remuneration has to be at a level where someone is comfortable. You take care of their baseline needs, then you can start to address their emotional and empowerment needs. So we increased all their baseline salaries to a reasonable rate. Some left because they like the money. Yeah, actually, that's a good point. Not everyone is going to want an Agile business. Not everyone can work in an Agile business. And I'm sure you've all met people who, as part of an Agile transformation, as part of Agile teams, go, I can't do this. It's okay for them to leave, right? Because they will thrive and flourish in a more traditional micromanaged organization, whereas you will then attract the people who are then Agile in their own thinking, and they will flourish in your organization. So there's going to be some movement in staff, and that's a good thing.
In essence, you improve the communication and you align the drivers to the salespeople with the rest of the team.
Pretty much. And the problem with a commission-based system is that we also found that when we actually embedded them within the team first, but we found that the commission driver was driving bad behavior, anti-patterns.
Exactly. The drivers are different.
The drivers are different. And because once they're in the team, there are different drivers between the sales and the developers, there was automatic friction between how they were working. Once we got rid of the commission, the drivers started to align, and we started to have much better collaboration around sales.
What about other incentives and bonuses to sales, like incentive drives, I don't know, company cars?
As long as the incentives get to a certain point, that's fine. But beyond a certain point, then they add no value. Measure it. A/B test your incentives. Okay. Give one suite of people for 6 months one set of incentives, and another for another 6 months another set of incentives. Measure which ones work. I've got time for one more question, and then I'm the guy in the three-piece suit, so you can come and find me anytime.
So there's collaboration one about the contracts not being a shield.
Yep.
And it sort of relates to the point you just made about, if somebody doesn't want to be agile, then they leave. So if you're a provider and the client doesn't like that or can't cope with that agile thing, they are going to continue using that contract as a shield.
No, look, you're absolutely right, and that's why I say that it's about a partnership. So, partnerships, trust is a two-way. It's a two-way thing. I'm not going to trust you any greater level than you trust me. All right. So, if you're my vendor. If I'm the vendor and I say, hey, look, we work with our customers in an agile way, we'll put this boilerplate template, which is a changeable contract, and your big organization, Telstra, BHP or whatever, and it's like, no, this is our standard operating procedure, we have to be part of this, then our relationship is going to stop at that level of contract. All right? Not all organizations, but the point is to build the relationship. It'll take 5 to 6 years to get up to any sort of level of strong trust between two companies. To get to that strategic partnership takes a long time, and not all your customers will, but to be agile, you need to be on that journey. Doesn't mean you have to be there, but you've got to be on that journey. All right, thank you very much. If you have any questions, come and chat with me.